Get off my lawn. That was probably Samuel Whittemore. My name's Kevin, and this is History Goon. What's going on, everybody? I'm not real sure how this episode is going to go. This is our first little foray back into the American Revolution, and I don't have a lot of information about this guy. Just a little bit from his early life. When I say early life, I mean we're going to jump forward quite a ways pretty quickly. But I just had to talk about this guy because he's such a badass. Just a badass old man. So this could be good. It could be not good. I don't know. You be the judge when it's all said and done. We'll see. We'll find out together as a couple. Born just in time to miss being tried for witchcraft, Samuel Whittemore came into the world July 27th, 1696. The second son of Samuel Whittemore and Hannah Ricks in Charleston, Massachusetts, which is a few hours from me. Now, remember just a little bit ago when I said we were going to jump forward pretty quick? Well, the next 48-ish years of his life are kind of a blur. In 1744, he oiled up his farm tools, and I'm sure he put them right back in the places that he had traced around each one on the pegboard in his shed, and joined up with the 3rd Massachusetts Regiment headed by Jeremiah Moulton. He is headed off to fight in King George's War, most notably the Battle of Louisbourg Fortress. When the ships landed on what is modern-day Nova Scotia, the French, they're pantaloons. They prepared to be sieged. The boys from Massachusetts are there to lay siege of the fort. So, the French being prepared for it, the English getting ready to do it, everything's copacetic. Everything is exactly how it should be. We have cohesion, and the world is how it is supposed to be. As they tend to do, the French would end up losing the fortress, and to the victors go the spoils, obviously. So the boys went in and looted the crapes out of this place. Good old Sam found a neat-looking French sword, but there's a slight issue with said French sword. It's still in the possession of the owner, but it turns out that the owner would, quote, die quite suddenly, according to Samuel. And I'm assuming he said that as he, wiped his bloody hands off on the previous sword owner's coat. In 1746, the French sent out a massive expeditionary force to retake the fort, and it was led by the most Frenchman of all time, Jean-Baptiste de la Rochefort de Roy. That comes with a bad mustache, a pack of cigarettes, a baguette, and body odor. I feel like I attacked myself because I am French. Anyway, because God hates the French, the force never made it there. Storms at sea, diseases on board, and the scourge of the sea, the British Navy, kept them all at bay. The Brits held the fortress until 1748 when the War of Austrian Succession came to an end. Why this had any effect on a war being fought between the French and British in Canada, I have no idea, but history's weird, and we're about to take an ADD break. The War of Austrian Succession is way too complicated to go through. If you want to experience it, I would highly recommend Total War Empire. It's a very good game, and it's in that same time period. Can I do that at some point in time? Yes, because I have it downloaded. No, I'm kidding. The War of Austrian Succession, maybe? I'm not sure it would be all that interesting. I think it would be more finding specific people from it, or particular battles may be cool, but covering the whole thing just, I don't think I have the bandwidth to do that in one shot. Anyway, with that being said, the Brits relinquished the fort back to the French and went back to the colonies because the war's over. We don't really need this. We don't really want it. but you can have it back, you know? Someone on the way out busted the Louisburg cross off the wall, and I know that I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but I also don't speak French and I refuse to pronounce it correctly. So, what are they going to do? Surrender at me? Get out of here. So, just to be safe, in case the French get uppity again, they've set up their own little fortified town of Chubutko Bay. Little, you know, kind of insignificant town that they named Halifax. Trailer Park Boys joke. Anyway, since this is a nice place, you know, good location and all that, the Brits would station the 29th Regiment of Foot there. Again, just in case, because you never know with these shifty Frenchmen. It'd be a real shame if in 1754 the fort at Louisburg got besieged again, now wouldn't it? Anyway, in 1754, the French and Indian War kicks off. And since we can't just be left alone, a multitude of European nations got involved, and it spiraled into what would become known as the 7 Years' War, which, how do I want to say this? You could make an argument that the 7 Years' War was technically the First World War, because you have multiple nations fighting on different continents on behalf of their own interest against each other. So, I mean, maybe if somebody smarter than me could make the argument that this is World War I. But we're not going to get into that whole thing now. We're just going to kind of focus on what's going on in Canada. So keep in mind, in 1757, where we are in the timeline right now, Samuel Whittemore is a spry, young, 61 years old. Most people are starting to, you know, wind it down at about 60 and go, you know what, I can just skate at work. What are they going to do? Fire the old man? Nah, they'll let me do whatever I want for the next 5 years until I can retire. Retirement wasn't really Sam's thing, as we're going to find out. He led troops during an attack to retake the fort again. And the French, having reinforced the fortress with a ton of fresh troops from Italy, they fought them pretty well. The French held their own here. But if there's one thing history has shown, it's that the French and English will never not want to kill each other. So the Brits would return to Halifax to regroup. In spring of we jumped ahead way forward. In spring of 1758, the Brits sent help north, led by Geoffrey Amherst, and they landed back at Louisburg in late May, early June, and besieged the fortress again. After 6 weeks of starving and not being able to leave, the French did what they do, and they wheeled the white flag up the pole. The surrender was made official on July 26th, and an early 62nd birthday party to our old boy Sam. Also, when he entered the fort, he set eyes on a pretty sweet set of French dueling pistols, and after the owner, quote-unquote, suddenly died again, he took them for his own. Happy birthday to me. It gets a little muddy here, but some documents show that he served in an expedition led against Chief Pontiac in 1763. He's like leading men to fight natives across western New York through Indiana into Michigan. At this point, he's a dragoon captain, which we've talked about the dragoons before in the Jan Sobieski episode with the Winged Hussars. Dragoons are basically cavalry fighters, but with guns. So, perfect example would be Jason Isaacs' character in The Patriot, who's actually based on a man named Bannister Tarleton, who I will be covering at some point because he was a scumbag. History will provide scumbags when you need them. So if I have my time frame right in my research, I think that Sam is part of the force that chased Pontiac off when he attempted to take Fort Detroit in 1763. Pontiac's War is something I definitely want to cover because that one is really, really interesting and a lot of weird stuff happened in it. Not as one-sided as people think when they think of, like the colonists fighting Indians. Because for a long time, they kicked our asses just as bad as we did theirs. So Pontiac lost here, but the Crown signed the Proclamation of 1763, which banned British settlers from moving any further west than the Appalachians. Which I think that may have been, we may have actually done that proclamation before also with the Cornstalk episode. I'd have to go back and re-listen, or you could as well if you want. Bump them numbers up. You can even watch that one on YouTube, or you should subscribe to my channel. This was basically just only delaying the inevitable, though. This was done to leave a barrier between the natives and the settlers so that they'd be able to live without running into each other. All is not well for the crown, though. Just 7 years later, March 5th of 1770, the shot heard around the world would take place and kick off the Boston Massacre. This obviously didn't sit with the colonists, and calling it a massacre is kind of... it's a little grandiose. I mean, a snowball got thrown, British soldiers up, they killed like 4 or 5 people. So, I mean, I don't really think I'd call that a massacre. I wouldn't even really, I mean, the Boston mass shooting is not a great name either, but massacre definitely has the right connotation to it when you're getting ready to fight the largest empire in the world at the time for your independence, and you're about to kick their asses with the help of the French and a incredible little gay German who I definitely have to talk about because he's fun. And the fact that he's gay makes no difference because he was a tactical wizard. He was so good at what he did. But the fact that he's also gay makes it even funnier. If anybody wants to get offended, like, oh, he's picking on gay people, I'm not. I don't care. Whatever you do between you and another consenting adult, I don't care. But just imagining this guy like sashaying and just being the biggest queen on the continent while he's teaching George Washington how to fight these guys with their own tactics so that we actually kick their asses is incredible. So our guy Sam may have been a British trooper. He was a British officer, as a matter of fact, but he is a motherfucking American first and foremost. Eagle Sound. When the revolution broke out, he knew which side of the bay his tea was going to be on. In the wake of the repeal of the Stamp Act in 1766, he served as a committeeman for the town of Cambridge. He was elected as a delegate to the Massachusetts Committee of Convention in 1768 and served on the Cambridge Committee of Correspondence. Now, this part here, it's about to get a little dry because it's all old-timey language and old-timey politics. So I'm going to apologize for that. And if you cut out here, I don't blame you. But I will warn you, there's a little bit more fun to come after this. Because I told you, he's a crazy old man. And he's not as old as he's going to get yet. May 12th of 1766, he and 2 other men formed a committee to go to the General Assembly of Massachusetts. He had this to say, quote, "We have lately seen the rights and privileges of ye people of this province, and indeed the whole continent, in the greatest danger ever from an act of British Parliament, which however otherwise intended, would in its operation have totally ruined them and greatly hurt Great Britain." He also says to Andrew Boardman of the General Court, quote, "Be always watchful for any further danger yet may arise from this quarter. Some regulations may hereafter be made which may prove unfriendly to our liberties." A little bit of foreshadowing there, because he's old enough and wise enough and smart enough to see the writing on the wall that if we don't do something now, the British are going to stomp us out, basically, by creating laws 5,000 miles away that will affect us, and we will see absolutely zero benefit from, like they're already doing. But it's going to get worse, because if we start fighting and we don't win the fight, they're going to come in and clamp down, and it's going to get really, really bad. The committee didn't trust English Parliament any further than they could throw them, and they made a demand. Quote, "We instruct you to avoid giving your suffrage for any gentleman who by any sort of dependence or correction may be under temptations to yield unreasonable demand of prerogative." Don't know what any of that means. They also did something pretty interesting. They asked Boardman to do what he could to set up a viewing gallery in the State House so that voters and people of the colony could go and watch lawmaking sessions and offer their input, which is really cool because that's not something you can do with British Parliament at the time. You can't just go there with like a bag of, I don't know, mushy pea sandwiches or whatever the English are eating and like throw your 2 cents in when somebody stands up to talk. Here, you can sit in the audience and you can raise your hand and go, hey, that's a shit idea. Or, hey, I like what you're saying. Let them cook. You couldn't do that with English Parliament. You can here. Not anymore, though, because you're not allowed to have any input as to what you want as an American citizen anymore. We put people in charge from each state that are supposed to, being the operative word, vote in the interest of their constituents. They're supposed to vote on what the people of their state say they want them to vote on and how they want them to vote. Unfortunately, we live in a country now where the people that we send to represent us represent their own interests and the interests of foreign countries and of companies above the people that they are supposed to represent. Something, 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 Tree of Liberty, something, something. Anyway, they wanted this because they were worried that if the elected officials were allowed to work behind closed doors, it would turn into a mini British Parliament. Huh. Kind of like what happens in Washington, D.C. If you watch it on TV and yell at your TV, you're not allowed to go in there and have any input in it, though. Because we just pay their salaries. We're not allowed to tell them what we think. And if they had to work in front of people they represented, they would have to be honest, which elected official and honest are usually not words that I would use in the same sentence. Unless that sentence is, honestly, I don't trust any elected officials. So, man, if I had enough room and the money for Komatsu, daydreams. Patreon.com/1159. Help me raise enough money to buy a Komatsu bulldozer. I can't weld, though, so that's the only problem. His next chance at some political stuff came in 1768 when Governor Francis Bernard dissolved the General Court under order of the Crown. We see who's taking care of the governor and who the governor is loyal to. Again, not the people in his state. He's loyal to some asswipe 5,000 miles away in a powdered wig to hide the fact that he has head lice. In February of that year, the Legislative Assembly had sent a circular letter to the other colonial legislatures to, quote, communicate their mind upon a common concern. The court was dissolved due to the refusal of the committee to take back the letter and apologize. So the governor steps in again and goes, I'm dissolving this because you refuse to say that you're sorry for undercutting my authority for you to do something like this. By September, Massachusetts was still without a General Assembly, and Boston was roiling with news that regiments would soon be arriving in town. Regiments of the British Army. The Boston town meeting decided to send a circular letter to various towns proposing that a committee of convention be held at Faneuil Hall in Boston on September 22nd, 1768. That place is still up, too, by the way. I know 1768 to 2025 doesn't sound that impressive to, like, Europeans because they have stuff like, hell, England has bars that are 500 years older than our country. But they also don't have the right to defend themselves anymore. Anyway, though, quote, deprived of a general council in this dark and difficult season, the selectmen expressed their conviction that, quote, the loyal people of this province will immediately perceive the propriety and utility of the proposed committee of convention and the sound and wholesome advice that may be expected from a number of gentlemen chosen by themselves. Yes, representation for the people that live here, by the people that live here. What a wild thought in the late 1700s. The selectmen invited each town to choose representatives to attend the convention. Just a few days later, on September 29th, the inhabitants of Cambridge met yet again, and a vote was held to determine, quote, whether it be the minds of the inhabitants of this town to proceed to choosing a person to join the committee of convention of the other towns in this province now sitting in Boston. This time, an answer is forthcoming. The town elected Samuel Whittemore as their representative, along with a man named Thomas Gardner. By the time the Cambridge delegates were elected, the convention had ended. So, got to it a little late. Neither Whittemore or Gardner actually ever attended the meetings because, like I said, it was over by the time they got there. The Boston Gazette noted that despite the business of the convention having already concluded, quote, Cambridge, by a very great majority, had indeed responded to Boston's call and elected representatives. Though unable to attend the convention, the chosen gentlemen desired to acquaint the public that they have carefully read the printed proceedings and result of the committees and highly approve. So basically, we didn't get to go there, but we got the minutes of the meeting, and we like where these guys are going. So you guys have elected us to make sure that we agree as a whole as to what's going on here, and we like it. Hopefully you do too. Whittemore accepted the charge of the Cambridge townspeople to serve as representative. Since the lawful general court had been dissolved, the convention of towns could have been viewed as an extra-legal gathering, which is how they put it. So this is going to essentially be like an unlawful protest, sort of, but not really a protest. Again, a gathering of people that are there illegally. The convention acknowledged that, quote, there are those who deemed it criminal for aggravated fellow subjects to join and petition for readiness. Governor Bernard believed the convention was unlawful and refused to accept any petitions, as doing so could recognize the Committee of Conventions as legitimate. So this guy is a turd. He's a British pawn because that's how governors worked back then. We didn't get to vote for them. They were appointed by the crown. So that's why so many of these decisions, like at the state level, where the governor has the final word, where the people are saying, this is what we want to do, the governor goes, nah, that's not what they would want over there, so we're not doing it. In December 1772, at the ripe old age of 76, Whittemore was elected to the Cambridge Committee of Correspondence. Just 1 month earlier, the first Committee of Correspondence had been formed in Boston. The goal of the Boston Committee was to, quote, state the rights of the colonists and of this province, to communicate and publish the same to the several towns. Accordingly, they sent a letter, now known as the Boston Pamphlet, to the various towns in the area, listing the violations committed by Great Britain and requesting support, advice, and correspondence from the towns. Cambridge responded pretty quickly to the Boston Committee's letter and held a town meeting on December 14th, 1772. The town voted to form the Cambridge Committee of Correspondence to communicate with Boston. So all these committee of correspondences are basically a committee of guys that they're electing to get together to write letters to the other towns. Probably should have explained that a little bit earlier. So instead of picking just one dude to say, you sit down and write, then we'll have somebody else read it, and he'll make any changes he wants. And then we'll have somebody read his, and it's just a big circle jerk where everybody's changing each other's work. Here we have to sit down and work together, like we'll see here in a couple of years, to write this thing out. And then we'll send it off so that the other towns can read it and see what they think. And if they agree with us, they'll send theirs back, yada, yada, yada. Whittemore and 8 other men were unanimously elected to serve on this committee. Whittemore's name appeared in the Boston Evening Post on December 21st, 1772, followed by his 8 other writers of that. According to the Boston Gazette, the Cambridge town meeting had been, quote, as full as it had been for the choice of a representative for a number of years, if not fuller. and that the people discovered a glorious spirit, like men determined to be free. Hell yeah. They continued, quote, "May every town in this province and every colony upon this continent be awakened to the sense of danger and unite in the glorious cause of liberty. Shall we be able effectively to disappoint the machinations of our enemies." This letter coming out of Cambridge in 1772 it's got a noticeably more forceful tone than the one from 1766, where they were trying to play nice, and now they're just like, nah, we're done. We're done taking your garbage. Um, so the last letter that they sent out of Cambridge is the one that they sent with Andrew Boardman right after the Stamp Act repeal. This is important because the three men on the Stamp Act repeal committee in 1766, Whittemore, Ebenezer Stedman, and Eliaphitt Robbins, were all members of the Cambridge Committee of Correspondence. And they were all on that committee again in 1766 when they sent this last one out. Their 1766 instructions, the committee professed to maintain, quote, "the strongest impression of the wisdom and uprightness of the Supreme Legislature," and generally attributed any unfavorable legislation to, quote, "unavoidable want of an adequate knowledge of our internal circumstances." Again, don't really know, but it sounded like it was one of those more important things to put in here. So that letter was sent out, and they basically told them that they wanted a response. And if they didn't get one by August of 1772, Great Britain as a whole was considered an enemy. About a year later, Whittemore affixed his signature to a particularly forceful letter that the Cambridge Committee sent to Boston to express their concerns and solidarity with regard to the Tea Act. What is the Tea Act? The Tea Act was the British law that granted the East India Company basically a monopoly on the sale of tea in the United States, or I'm sorry, in the American colonies, because we're still British at this point. So, but most people saw it as just a way for the British to tax them without actually taxing them. You know, the whole taxation without representation horse that they were talking about. So this is another letter that they wrote. Quote, "If we cease to assert our rights, we shall dwindle into supineness, and the chains of slavery shall be fast riveted upon us. The late act of the British Parliament empowering the East India Company to export tea on their own account and expose the same to sale is a recent proof of the determination of the ministry to pursue their diabolical plans to enslave the Americans." Which, yeah, they're financially enslaving them, basically. Because they're not I don't believe they're taxing the company that's selling the tea. They're only taxing the people that are buying it, and they're the only people they can buy it from. A couple of weeks later, the committees of Cambridge, Brookline, Roxbury, and Dorchester met for a joint conference on resisting the Tea Act. Now, it's unfortunate that Sam Whittemore didn't attend this meeting. If he had, he would have been able to talk to men that, like him, were destined to achieve immortality in the annals of the American Revolution. Samuel Adams, Dr. Joseph Warren, Josiah Quincy Jr., James Otis Jr. were all members of the Boston Committee. He could have just Forrest Gumped his way right into American history. At this meeting, the committees voted in favor of, quote, "using their joint influence to prevent the landing and sale of the tea expected from the East India Company." Another letter is then sent to the towns containing the consensus of the joint conference. These letters declared that the arriving tea was, quote, "even more to be dreaded than plague or pestilence." It's tea. And it went on to basically politely tell people not to drink the tea and to, quote, "impress upon the minds of your friends, neighbors, and fellow townsmen the necessity of exerting themselves in a most zealous and determined manner to save the present and future generations from temporal, and we think we may with seriousness say eternal destruction. Don't drink the tea. It will kill your grandkids. Again, we're getting a little like grandiose, you know? So with all of that being said, about 3 weeks after these letters went out, Boston would hold the first annual Boston Tea Party. Which I will have to get the pictures from my cousin. We're pretty confident that we had an ancestor that was there chucking boxes in the water. April 19th, 1775. So again, we're going to jump forward a little bit because that's just what this story does. Just shy of his 79th birthday, Sam Whittemore is just kind of hanging out on his farm as British troops are returning to Boston. The brigade of relief troops led by Earl Percy had been harassed and shot at from the roadsides by local militiamen. So they're not in the best of moods. When the 78-year-old man stepped to his porch and demanded they show the utmost prudence while removing themselves from his farmstead, which is the old-timey version of, hey, you kids, get off my lawn. And when they didn't remove themselves expeditiously, he stepped back inside the house. He came back out with a musket and dueling pistols and told them, not asked them this time, told them to leave. What he wasn't aware of, though, was these weren't your run-of-the-mill teenage redcoats. These were grenadiers of the 47th Regiment of Foot. And grenadiers aren't really the guys you want to mess with. They were usually like physically the biggest and strongest guys, and they were specially trained to throw grenades in assault positions, usually at the end of a bayonet. So grenadiers they're pretty badass. You don't really want to mess with them too much. Words were exchanged at a distance. Most likely one of the young bucks in his neat red coat saying something like, "Oh, you want to shoot me, you old geezer?" Or whatever the hell the British would say. So after this stream of British nonsense, I just imagine he went full-blown like,
I blow a hole in your face and then I go in the house and I sleep like a baby. You can count on that. We used to stack like you 5 feet high.
Laid a lead ball 3/4 of an inch in diameter through this kid's forehead. The rest of the men, standing there in shock that this man that should have been dead of old age 30 years ago had just killed one of their own, they did what they did and returned fire. Whittemore, again, 78 years old, dove behind a stone wall as musket balls mushroomed against the stones and he reloaded. The redcoats reloaded. The young men started to close in across the grass, and Samuel Whittemore popped up and killed another one with his musket. They stayed in formation and fired again and again had to reload. Muskets take a long time to reload. I think they said on average, a very, very good musketeer back then could have fired off like 3 or 4 rounds a minute because of how long it took to pack your powder, you pack your shot, you pack your wadding. It's a pretty time-consuming thing. And then when you have other people that don't want to wait and they start shooting at you while you're doing that, pretty tough. Whittemore, on the other hand, didn't have to reload quite yet. He ripped off shots with his dueling pistols and killed another one. One of the Brits decided to break ranks and start moving to the side, which distracted Sam. He rose to shoot the son of a bitch that was trying to flank him, and when he stood, he took a musket ball in the face and went down. When they saw him fall, they charged. The remaining 4 redcoats stuck him 6 times with bayonets and beat him in the head with clubs and musket butts. Poor Sam. After they were done, they left the bloody body of Samuel Whittemore laying in his own front yard and continued to Boston. High-fiving, no doubt, for having killed an old man. His family found him pretty quickly after the Brits left, and they dragged him in the house, got him into a bed, did what they could, and an hour and a half or so later, the lifeless body of Samuel Whittemore reanimated. He wasn't quite dead yet after all. His head is smashed. He's got blood running from a bunch of bayonet wounds. Part of his jaw and cheek are missing. His children were taking care of him to the best of their ability. They're trying to stop the bleeding. They're trying to get a doctor out there to take care of him. Unfortunately, Samuel Whittemore would succumb to his wounds. 18 years later, in 1798, there is no doubt that this man is the oldest man in the history of our country to this day to have fought in active combat. He was 93 years old when he died peacefully in his Menominee, Massachusetts home, surrounded by his family. Not only was he a prolific killer of French and Brits, he was also a master pipesman. He wanted to make sure that his family line was long and strong. He's responsible for 185 direct descendants and countless indirect ones. In 2005, he was officially made the state hero of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that was Sam Whittemore, our first little trip back to the American Revolution. Like I said, the middle, a little dry, right? We're just coming off of Thanksgiving a few weeks ago. And, it's good. Turkey's great when it's fresh. Gets a little dry, and it's Then a couple days later, you make sandwiches with it, and you put gravy on it, and you heat it up, and it's just perfect. And I like to think that this guy had the ending that he deserved, and the ending that he would have wanted for his own story. I honestly don't expect myself to make it to 93. I don't have a good family history for it. Hell, I'll be lucky to make it to my mid-70s. But for this guy to have just busted up a couple of punk-ass Brit teenagers, basically, that were on his lawn, that he didn't want on his lawn, at 78 years old, is pretty impressive. He's a testament to the American spirit. That if we don't like you, and you're on our property, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how old we are. If you're here, and you're uninvited, and we don't want you here, we will shoot you. This guy was awesome. There's a lot of other really cool Revolutionary War figures that I need to get on my list, but he was definitely one of them. So, with all that being said, patreon.com/1159media. $5 a month gets you early access to Guestnicity with Luther, which I, as of time of recording this, would be a few weeks ago, had the opportunity to go on. I was on there with Chase from Almost Fiction, another 1159 show. You also get early access and backdoor access to 911 calls with the operator, and the Never Daily with Sam and Chase. That's a pretty good deal for $5. I highly recommend doing it. It's well worth your money. And also, I have a Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/historygoonpod. You can throw me a couple bucks there. Like I said, the last couple weeks, anything donated up until January 1st, I'm going to donate to a friend's dog rescue that she runs. Just wanting to do something nice around the holiday season to try to help somebody out. And also she helps dogs. So, that's kind of a no-brainer for me to want to help dogs too, because I love dogs. But anyway, until we meet again, and actually the next time we come back, we're going to go from the 1770s up to the 1960s. So we're going to jump a little bit in time here for something very interesting. But until then, we're all going to die someday. So go out and do some goon shit and leave a mark on the world, just like Sam Whittemore. Love you guys.